Today, I brought back my good friend Dean Guido, and more often than not, I've called him Dean Guido. But in the times when he's asked how to say his name, he'll usually default to Guido. And sometimes I've called him Guedo because that is the French way in which he learned last time he was on the podcast. So, a bit of backstory before I keep rambling here is that the very first time that Dean was on the podcast, I believe it was episode 4 of the Lifestyle Chase. So you can find that episode by going to thelifestylechase.podbean.com, and you're gonna find so much contrast into where we were each at with our life and our career and what was going on and the things that we were talking about. But then you can also see how it kind of unfolds and how a lot of things kind of became true. I remember we were talking a little bit about like he wanted that whole lifestyle of being able to do things that were fulfilling, and then he put it into play by downsizing and moving and having his boat and being able to like live his best life in the summer without spending too much time in the continuing education, but just enough time to feel fulfilled. In this episode, we talk a whole bunch about the pandemic situation. We talk a little bit about just mentors and people and fitness and nutrition. And we ramble on about a few things. There's a couple times when we each go off on tangents. There's definitely one moment where I completely forgot what I was getting at, and he kind of saved me. And it's a very real, like, if you know us both, this is what you see is what you get. If you like either one of us for any reason, I think that you'll enjoy this one. So thanks for listening, and yeah, check it out. Welcome to the Lifestyle Chase, Season 2. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. I'm your host, Chris Little. Let's get started. The Lifestyle Chase is brought to you by Yeg Fitness. Yeg Fitness is Edmonton, Alberta, Canada's healthy lifestyle community, creating and supporting active living for all. Check them out online at yegfitness.ca and on social media at yegfitness. Well, welcome to the Lifestyle Chase, episode 113. I am joined by Dean Guido, who sometimes I call Dean Guido, sometimes I call him Dean Guedo, but I've given him about 40 shoutouts on the show, so it's like you win some, you lose some. He gets free promo, and I mess up his name sometimes. How you doing?
Good. Did we go over this last time? Like, I just learned, like, I want to say like 2 years ago, it's Guedo.
Yeah.
And like it's French, and I don't know. Anyways, I like don't like that, like, because I've used Guido probably my whole life, and then I say Guido. But like you said, it doesn't really matter at a certain point. It's like, do you know who I am? And does whatever name works for you? And if I respond to it,
if he's like, "Hey, what's up?" and then you got it. But it's just like, depending on the day of the week, like I'll be talking to Andrew about you or something. I'm like, "Yeah, Dean Guedo," and he kind of looks at me. I'm like, "Yeah," and Dean Guido, and he like. I'm never the same. It's like a game of Russian roulette as to which one I'm gonna do. And then I was like getting ready for the show, and I was like, okay. He has said many times Dean Guido, and I just can't wrap that around my head, but I'm going to try really hard this time. So
I actually like Guido the most.
Well, it's just, yeah.
Funny you're talking about your episodes. You're almost caught up to ours.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you count my daily ones, I've broken 200 because, like, one for every day of 2020. But those are short, easy ones, so they don't really count. But, like, as far as ones with guests, like, I'm just freaking hauling ass.
That's crazy. That's like, because you started like way later than us.
Like about a year later. Like I listened to yours for like a year, and then I started mine.
Funny, because I was like, I know you always message me and you're like, I'm gonna beat yours. I'm like, and like it's almost like I want to take it as a competition to do more episodes, but I have no intention of trying to beat you at it because it was just the amount, the speed we can bring them out is not something I'm willing to do.
It's a big commitment to play that game.
I got to do it to Andrew too, and we can only do it usually one day a week. So it's kind of like not anymore with all this pandemic stuff, but generally it's been Thursdays we record. So there's only so much we can really do. Where you can kind of like my singular podcast, my secondary one.
Yeah,
I can just do whatever I want. It's way easier to put out episodes when you're not restricted by like a time window.
It's so true. So the last time that we talked on this podcast, I think it was like the very first month of me putting these out. So I
Yeah.
believe it was like September 2018.
Really? And
Isn't
like
that nuts?
it was last second too, because I think someone canceled on you or something.
Yeah, yeah. This time it was very we planned this in advance. So how has life
And I
changed for
canceled on
you?
you. And I canceled your 12 o'clock. I was like, do you
Oh
want to do it?
yeah, no big deal. How has life changed for you in the last couple years?
Oh, that's crazy. If I can think back, because like September 2018, so a lot of things changed. More or less, more of it's been life stuff. But I guess well, that's not true. So career stuff too. So long story short is kind of from that time between September and March of the next year. So March of last year, we downsized our house. So I went through this like life phase where like I need to have all the nice stuff, like the new house, like artificial turf, a fire table, two brand new cars, and it was just kind of it became too much, and I started to reprioritize what I wanted out of life, and it kind of just through a lot of the some people that you've interviewed, and just some of the people in my network, I've just had better role models in terms of what I wanted to do, and I just decided to make the hard choice to change it all. So that included like selling our house. We sold our condo, and then we downsized to a smaller house in St. Albert, so a place where like a suburb near where we live, just to be closer to family and have just much smaller footprint on the world in terms of finances and everything. And yeah, just decided to do all that, and then kind of aligned with that, I switched careers. So I kind of went from owning our own private studio. So my business partner actually moved to Australia. So he kind of went through this whole life phase too. Moved to Australia. We closed the gym down. I reopened up in my basement, but kind of slowly over that period transitioned into online coaching through nutrition. And so the company I think I was working for back when we talked was Strong You Fitness. I actually moved over to their nutrition side as a coach for one-on-one nutrition, and that kind of just picked up so fast that I was able to literally switch my career to being almost full-time online coach. So basically everything changed, but my life is, I want to say, a lot more streamlined now, and kind of I'm doing what I want more often than I'm not, which is kind of a good place to be, which is weird, but I'm still getting used to it. And then the whole world changed and we got COVID.
Well, we didn't literally get COVID, but you
No,
know, we're dealing with it as a community.
yeah, and weirdly, so like not a lot of the stuff I was worried about. So if I look at like life and everything, a lot of the stuff I was worried about was just being in over my head stress wise. So like feeling like the money was just like, it just felt like I had too many things. And if something wrong were to happen, like my whole life would implode. Like if I lost my job, or like if COVID happened or something where like my finances, I was almost like house poor, and I was like car poor, and it was just, I wanted to do all these education courses. And so I felt like I was one straw away from just like breaking the camel's back. And so going through that process, I actually ended up prepping myself for a COVID pandemic, because I work online. I don't have to leave my house. All my expenses are like way down, and I don't need anything. So it was kind of weird, because I feel like I've been prepping for the end of the world, so to speak, and now I'm kind of here, and it's not as bad as it would have been had my stress and finances been out of control. If that makes sense.
Well, that's a great analogy to use because honestly, the first couple of weeks of all of this stuff, where it's like, okay, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen next week. We don't know where the income's going to come from. My quickest correlation was like my first like month after I quit my job. I was like, I didn't know anything that was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to get a job. I didn't know if anybody was going to hire me. I didn't know where my food was going to come from. I just kind of like took it day by day and tried to be positive. And that's just basically what this whole thing has been. On that topic, what are the ways that you've had to stay positive? Because you're human, you're going to have your points. Like, what do you have to do?
The biggest thing for me, like kind of, so like this whole thing happened when I was in Costa Rica. So I was actually not even in the country. I was on like this big learning trip where I had to present. And anyways, I was gone. So I was kind of having to figure out, I wasn't that unhappy until I got home. And not that I was unhappy, it's just I had to prep for the worst, because like the whole world was going crazy. We were like, there was a point where we didn't know if we were going to be able to leave the country or get in our country, or if they let us in if we've been traveling abroad because they think we had COVID. Anyways, a lot of it has been during that time prepping myself for the long term. So instead of thinking like there's a lot of people in my network that were kind of, when this whole thing was happening in Costa Rica, like it only last a week, like 2 weeks and it's back to normal, because things were kind of slowly shutting down over time. And so it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And kind of my thought process was, I'm going to prepare for this thing to be 4 months long, like at least 4 months long. And knowing that I had all my other things in a row in terms of finances and my house and my career and stuff, I knew I could do it. So I just mentally prepared for the worst and then made the best in that situation, which coincidentally didn't really change. Like we were talking before the podcast, is the only thing that's changed really is that we can't go to family dinners on Sunday and I can't go to Good Life. Other than that, like I work from home, I have a gym at home. And so it was just, how do I keep everything as close to what it was before? And for me, unfortunately, nothing really changed. So I was able to do that. I was able to keep my workout schedule. I was able to more or less keep the same amount of work. Like things have slowed down a bit just through the company stuff. But generally, how do I mimic the same life I had before in a pandemic? And I was able to do that. And a lot of it just comes down to, I prep for it to be a long-term thing. And it's kind of like, if it ends quicker than that, then it's like, oh, I'm even more happy. So I don't know, just a reframing of the situation.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. Is just kind of like perspective and just point of view, like how you see your situation. Not that you're in trouble, just that you're ready, you're prepared.
Yeah, and like it seems like really weird. I think I had Mark Fisher on the podcast. So he like runs Mark Fisher Fitness out of New York, and he was this big, like, I don't know, like I don't even know what they call it. It's like this big, they have unicorns and ninjas and their theater production, but it's like kind of wrapped into fitness. Anyways, he's always been like a person that I followed for like how to kind of take on this stuff. And when we had him on the podcast, he wasn't like, he's usually a really happy guy. Like he's like that theater type where he's very outgoing, and he was like not. And it was interesting because he was like, yeah, we prepped for this thing to be a year long. And he was kind of going through things logically. And he's like, I sound like a doomsday prepper, but like, if I don't do it, I may not be around. So if I don't survive this, I don't have a place for people to come do fitness. I don't have a place for people to come change their lives. I don't have the impact I had. I don't have the ability to hire people. And so I'm not in the same situation. Like I don't own a gym with probably like $100,000 overhead a month, but I do have, the reframing of, if I don't outlast this thing and come out more or less unscathed, then if I don't do that, I can't do the things that I'm doing, which essentially, if we're in the fitness industry, we can kind of narrow it down to, it's going to help people in the end. If I don't take care of myself in terms of getting through it, I won't have the impact in the future when things are going to be needed. So when this whole thing clears out, is when people are going to probably take care of their fitness and their nutrition, because that's all the stuff that's helping people last through it. So if I can last through it, I'm going to be available when the time comes, when everything does kind of come back. And it's going to come back way harder than it did before, I would kind of guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like my best example for just being ready for when things are ready to go. Like my first thought was, I was like, okay, I'm not going to have access to the same fitness equipment that I did before, but what I do have access to is some generally good nutrition. So it's like I've been more dialed in with my nutrition now than I was in the months leading up to this. Like just a very high protein diet, because that way I can retain as much muscle mass as what is realistic and not gain a bunch of just fat. Like essentially, by not eating nothing but cookies,
Yeah.
I can give myself the best case scenario versus it's for me, my biggest thing is if it's in my house, I'm pretty likely to eat it.
Yeah.
And so I set myself up for success by buying things like eggs, Greek yogurt, some lean meat, lots of lentils, chia seeds, chickpeas, you name it. Lots of vegetables, lots of fruit, just to help myself feel full, satiated, and then I have control over what I have control of. And then I come out of this thing and I'm not going to be deadlifting 500 pounds, but I will probably deadlift like 400 pounds. Like, it's just, there's going to be some things that I'm already accounting for that will change. I can already tell that I'm getting a little bit like smaller. I'm not as strong feeling or looking, but it's like my body composition will still look that of a trainer, and I will have health on my side. I will have a good immune system because I'm getting the nutrition that is needed to support that. And I think a lot of people almost undervalue that to some extent.
Well, and one of the things, so we more or less deal with, let's say that whole thought process is like kind of what we deal with our clients, like literally weekly at this point, because I do nutrition. And one of the things is like, so we've had, I don't know, we're on like week 4 or 5. I want to say like the first 2 weeks, it's kind of like it's up or down depending on what we're gonna get. Some people got super motivated, like you, and some people got like they were like crazy. They were like deer in the headlights, like the whole world's ending. Like how do I? My kids are at home. I have to teach them. I still have to do work or whatever, or I lost my job. So there was this whole period of like chaos, and so for those people, it's just been about like having compassion and empathy for the situation, but kind of after that 1 or 2 weeks, start to reframe it in the way that you said, like start having healthier choices, start getting your protein in line. Like this is the time, not necessarily that you have to get stuff done, but start controlling what you can control, because it's not like, again, this thing could last for 4 months. And what are you going to do? Like gain 40 pounds? Like that's not realistic. And it's not helpful in terms of if you do want to survive this thing. And so it's just been about, I guess, reframing it is helpful, but one of those things where you were talking about with nutrition is like, that's one of the things we can control, but it's also can be uncontrollable if you don't leave your house and you have stuff around. So it kind of depends on which person you are, but there's some people that actually being at home is probably the worst situation because they keep those things around. But then for other people, it's been the best thing ever because they can't eat out. They're not drinking as much. And so it kind of is just interesting seeing the different dynamics between how people are handling this thing and who's succeeding and who's not. But I think anyone at this point, we've already been in it for a while. It's at this point, it's like, now what? Because if this thing lasts forever, not forever, if this thing happens for a few months, God forbid, but at least you will have those skills for when we leave this thing. Kind of like what you're saying is like, you'll still look like a trainer, but you'll have your nutrition on point so that when you jump into the ability to do the weights and have the access to the equipment, you already have kind of laid the foundation for a better food environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And like at the same time, as much as I always want to preface these conversations with the fact that like everybody's going through different stuff, and
Yeah.
some of this is like really mentally jarring, and it's harder to have to adhere to someone else's guidelines than it is to kind of go through the process in the way that seems right for you. So like I guess to explain that better, it's just like this is probably the least opportunistic time to tell people what to do. It's more so just being there as an
Yeah.
empathetic person. And so like for me it's just kind of looking at the situation and understanding that I totally forgot what I was trying to say.
Well,
What was I getting at?
well, the thing I hear, like when I hear that is like, yeah, like I like the compassion part. And this is like my take on it is that like, because I usually come off very, very candid to people and they think like I'm an asshole. But like, I do understand that people have struggles. Like I have I have a lot of clients. And so like I've seen kind of like all iterations of this pandemic. But the way I like sleep at night with kind of not having compassion is that I had compassion for the 2 weeks where like things were like shit hit the fan. Like it's understandable you have to get into a new routine. Like, yeah, like you said, the kids are at home, like you're working. I still have to teach my kids school and there's no food available and there's no toilet paper. Like, yeah, okay. Like you have 2 weeks kind of in my head where like you're allowed to suck. Like, and that's totally normal. Like stress is through the roof. But my way of feeling better about myself is that if I don't get them back on track, and that might mean a little bit of candid talk with them, like, listen, like, yeah, I get it, like things are stressful, but you got to fucking figure it out, because if you don't, you're not going to be that person that you need for all these things that you're saying that are in your life. Like your kids at home, they need you, they need to be taught, you still need to perform at work, because if you don't have a house because you can't get paid, like that's a problem. And so it's one of those things where my job is personally is to be that person to them, because not everyone's going to do that. Some people will like it's almost like you can be too compassionate for the situation to the point where it's now what you call, you're almost enabling that cycle. And again, different people, different strategies, but for that type of equation, I don't like people to sit in it too long, because like then what? Because like imagine this thing lasts for, like I said, keep going back to it, but 4 months. Like you have to have an action plan, and you have to kind of come out of this you have to come out of this thing successful, because like not being successful means like you're out in the street, or your kids don't get food, or whatever. And like I can't sleep at night if I'm helping that process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that explained it well, and like I think I figured out how I'm going to expand on it. It's just like enlightening people as to their outcome. It's just like so they don't need to be they don't need their hand held to get
No,
to where they could possibly go to. But if they know where their choices could take them, then it might help them in making their choices. So if
absolutely.
they understand, like, okay, so their job that they're doing is a physical labor job, or where they are in their age, if they make certain choices, it increases their risk of like heart disease, or it decreases their ability to carry their grandkids. Like if they're understanding that those are the end outcomes, and it's just the here and the now of what we're trying to control is only trying to facilitate better outcomes, then it'll influence them to make those decisions that are kind of like muddy water right now because we just don't know where we are in space, but still just as relevant as they were when everything was normal and it wasn't muddy water.
That's the crazy thing, is like, maybe this is coming from my coaching background, but again, like nothing's changed. Like, yeah, everything's changed, but in terms of how, and this is maybe on the fitness professional end of things, the way we consult our career and our interaction with the clients hasn't changed. Like imagine if it's not a pandemic, like if it's not a pandemic, it's traffic. If it's not traffic, it's like my boss sucks. If it's not my boss sucks, it's like, yeah, my kid got beat up at school. Like, there's always something, and there's always that stress, and there's always a reason not to do something. It's just a matter of like, what is it this month? And so it's that whole idea of reframing it. It's like all that stuff is just noise. Like there's still this thing that you say you want. So like kind of put it in terms of like, yeah, give them the understanding of like this stuff is happening, and here's each choice of which way you can go. And I always like to think that people don't inherently want to make the shitty choice. Like they don't want to sit at home for 4 weeks and watch reruns of Friends and eat 10 bags of chips a day. Like that's not usually what happens. But if they don't kind of snap out of it, or kind of realize, hey, this thing that you're doing will lead to this thing that you don't want, then they don't really have the ability to make that choice. And I'm not saying that everyone's ignorant to their choices, but I think a lot of times in my space with nutrition coaching, when people are paying for advice, like they're there because they have a barrier of being able to have that thought process. And that's kind of my job, to snap them out of it, so to speak. Not hold their hand, just kind of outline things. Like at the end of the day, they're still gonna have to do the work. Like even with your stuff, as like you're doing online training sessions, like you literally can't do it for them.
Yeah, yeah.
which I guess is like the eye opener of all this thing. It's like, that's what I mean. Nothing has changed. It's just a matter of like what the stress is.
There's like a dynamic to the whole fitness scene that I've really like learned to value so much more, and it looks different for everybody. Like I mean, there's meditation, that's a thing, but then there's also like journaling or tracking of sorts as to like your emotions that day, how your workout felt, what's going on in your day, how your sleep was, and I think that that should be emphasized more now than ever, because that might be something that's eye-opening for people who just don't know where they're at. Like my best example, one of the other things that I've been trying is essentially I reduced consumption of alcohol significantly. I'm not someone who consumes a lot to begin with, but I basically brought it down to as close to zero as what was realistic. Like Easter, I had some wine with dinner, but aside from that, it's very little to none. Because if I was to like journal how I was feeling every day, the trend would trend downward.
Yeah.
And if I'm like stuck by myself and I'm trying to control what I can control, why would I set myself up with variables where it trends downward? Like, yes, it's a certain sense of like you feel less stress in those moments where you're chugging back a beer or whatever. But it's like if you understand that it's going to be like a 4 week process, you want to set yourself up with things that trend upward. And it's really easy for me to say that and not really understand a person in their day, but it's easier for them to understand how it could benefit them, perhaps just in the stance of like general population, people who are just casually consuming beverages, for them to see what impact it has on them in the grander scope of things. Like if they were to journal and track and see how it affected their workouts, how it affected their sleep, how it felt affected their mood, or like the if they even read back to their journal entries and see just like how that stuff looked or the things that they talked about. I think that's a really powerful thing right now. I think it's might be hippy dippy, but it's super effective when you are independent and like I can't go and like impact my clients through like a pat on the back or anything, but I can give them the tools that can kind of make them a bit more resilient in this time when we need as much resilience as we can.
Well, the big thing is like you don't know until you know. So like with like you don't so like using the drinking as example, like you don't know what the performance impacts are going to be in the gym or like how you feel about life until you kind of have that other end of the spectrum to compare it to. And like I said, people don't generally want to make the wrong choice. So like when they feel good about something and they feel bad when they do that one thing, a lot of times when people are drinking lots, like let's say they have like 3 drinks a night and it's like impacting their sleep and their stress levels and blah 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 blah, they don't actually understand it at a time because that just feels normal until they have like that eye-opening experience, so to speak, of the benefits of these things. And like a personal story for me is like we talked about previously, me moving and me downsizing and me kind of reprioritizing things. That all started when more or less I went to Texas with that group of people. I think you had Mike T. Nelson on, but like I had the whole Ben House network and Lucy Hendricks was involved in Costa Rica. But that whole network of people, I got out of my environment here and went to the jungle in Costa Rica to like learn from a bunch of pros. But with that, there was meditation. There was a lot of my mentors. There was a lot of examples of people kind of going through these changes and kind of what they've done in their career. And that was for me, the eye-opening part of it is like, I had my life the way I thought it was, and then I get pulled out of that environment, and I'm meditating, and now I'm interacting with people that are at a really high level, and I realized not how bad my life was, but how good I felt with the stuff that these people were saying, and it caused me to change because you get pulled out of that environment, and I realized how much was going on in my life and how much noise was kind of reoccurring day to day, and I had to make a change for it because I didn't want to go back to what I was previously living. So, and I changed everything. So I think that, and where I'm going with this is you kind of need that thing for you. So whatever that thing is in your life. So maybe the trigger is drinking. Maybe it's like just actually doing exercise, or maybe it's walking more, but you kind of you need to have that enlightening moment to kind of realize which choice you want to make. And I just don't think a lot of people, myself included, I couldn't make that choice because I had no idea there was another choice because I was just existing in my head, and it took me to leave my current environment. And so for a lot of people, this pandemic is it's good or bad. For some people, it's pulling them out of that environment. Now everything's changed, and that's a good thing. But for some people, now they're stuck in a shittier environment, so they need something else. And I think that's where coaching is helpful, or like having someone like you doing the training sessions, and that's where all these things could be an opportunity for that moment for a lot of people. And it's just a matter of figuring out which moment to pull on, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And like another example that you kind of reminded me of is essentially like for my little light bulb moment is essentially I pile on all these little things that I do. Like the first couple of weeks that I was by myself in my pandemic mode, I was cranking out so many like little fitness videos and still doing all the podcasts and stuff. And there were certain things that I had to do in order for that to work. Like I had to get to bed at a certain time. I had to eat healthy. I had to drink lots of water. I had to like we talk about meditation, and my best example of what meditation is for me is that process that it takes in order to come up with a daily episode every day. So you kind of have to think about like, okay, what happened to me today, and what happened to me yesterday, and how can I not say the exact same thing 2 days in a row? And what did I actually learn? And then how will I articulate that out? Like before, I always really struggled with the whole like, how can I meditate? Like, how can it be my thing? And then I realized it's just like, don't overthink it. Just go through like a sort of decompression process, implement some sort of structured breathing of some sort, and you're halfway there. Like for you, what is meditation like for you?
Well, that's what I was gonna. You kind of brought up that point of like, so like I've done meditation because, like I said, I went to Costa Rica. We sit in the jungle, and it's like there's something crazy about like sitting with like 20 other people in silence, like with all these jungle noises. So like it was kind of eye opening in the sense like this is meditation. But to me, like meditation is just like that change of mode from like sympathetic to parasympathetic. Like what can you do to get out of that mode? And a lot of the times, again, it's just experiencing the other end and then figuring out how to add that into your life. So for example, like when you work out and you want to do heavy weights, like you get super amped up, and like that's not the meditation state. Like that's the exact opposite of what it is. But for a lot of people, that like tight feeling or that like stress feeling is traffic. It's your stressful job. It's whatever. Like that's one state, and the other state is just something that's calming to you. And like whatever that thing is, like you said, you can breathe. For like a lot of my clients, when we do training, it's we down regulate by getting in position and doing some like full breaths with like hamstrings and abs and all these things that kind of get them out of that state and down regulate. But for other people, it could be reading, it could be doing a puzzle, it could be something that like it could be playing music. And so like I think there's a lot of merit, and we'll just say everything's on a sliding scale of like really stressful to like that parasympathetic, and you need both ends. Like you need to push yourself to kind of get yourself further along the progress, but you can't stay there. It's like you said, you can do tons of podcasts and you can do all these videos, but there's a point where too much is just more isn't always better. And so I guess my point is find out what that thing is for you. And for me, what is it for me? Lately it's weirdly, and I know this isn't like the best, it's not full down the spectrum because I just don't like sitting unless I'm forced to. Like that's just me. It is video games, but video games isn't full on parasympathetic. It's kind of like in that mid zone for me. But like right now, that's kind of where I'm at. Otherwise, it's usually listening to podcasts and doing stretching. So I'll like, and I don't really talk about that because people jump on you for stretching. But I like to like do some of my rehab drills, so to speak, and some stretching stuff, and just like hang out in my own head down in my basement. And for me, that's my meditation. It's not the most effective meditation, but for me and where my head's at, it kind of works. But
Well,
I guess it works for you.
yeah, and it's good that you say that because I have a lot of friends that probably listen to the podcast, and they they'll talk about meditation. They'll say, "Oh, I can't do meditation." I'm like, "No, like seriously, like we can all do it. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of like choosing your thing of what is meditation for you." And then I'll ask you, and you'll be like, "Oh, meditation for me is playing piano." I'm like, "Oh, sweet, that's awesome. You're doing it." And like,
Yeah.
"Are you doing it every day?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "Can you do it every day?" And like, "I guess I can." You know?
What's that? It's that choice thing. It's like people don't usually want to make the shitty choice. The thing I'll say about so for video games, I'll clarify. I think competitive video games, so like we'll just use Call of Duty or something like where you're kind of like hyper focused. I don't think that that's very meditative. But like I'll play like games like it's a game called like Stardew Valley. It's like simulation farming, or like I have this Animal Crossing game, like super weird games, but they're like there's like no purpose to the game other than like there's like you can do whatever you want. There's like no boss or anything. So anyways, that's relaxing. But for the meditation stuff is the cool thing about meditation is, like you said, you don't need anything. Like there's all the apps and stuff that are free, but like you don't even need that. You literally just have to sit and be quiet for like 30 minutes. I'll say this with the meditation stuff, if you can figure it out and you can do it and you can find a way where it works for you, I do think it's the best way to like kind of do that down regulation. It's one of those things. And Ben House, one of my mentors, he kind of went through, he's like, so we go in the jungle, we do meditation every morning and kind of every night after supper. So like, there's a lot, there's like between 15 and 30 minutes of sitting. Like that's a lot. And he's like, yeah, I want you guys to try to figure out how to include it in your life because it's the first thing to go. Like when everything gets stressful, it's like no one wants to sit with their thoughts. So I guess, and like that's always the first thing to go for me. So if you can figure out a way to do it, it is a unique experience that can kind of enlighten you to how stressed out you are. That being said, it can be very difficult. So I don't know if I have advice for how to continue doing it, but I will say if you could figure out a way to include in your life, the asset in having it is just being able to see what it's like to literally be that calm or that quiet. It's unique that you can't really feel without doing it. Like piano won't do it, video games won't do it. You kind of need to experience it just to kind of know where that spectrum lies between like really amped up and like really down regulated. It's kind of nice to have both of those ends, and you can figure out which activity allows you to be in the best spot on that spectrum.
Well, I mean, that was a good point that you kind of made there, and part of it is just in my conversations because like I think probably 10 episodes in a row I asked people about meditation because I was trying to like figure out from a group from different people of different walks of life, different skill sets, different education, and just kind of see what the general answer was. And a lot of what I've heard is it's like you're not going to really sense the impact that meditation has on you for a matter of like maybe 4 or 5 weeks. Like somebody might go through this entire thing and not really notice the difference that meditation makes on them directly, or their process that they go through. And they might notice it more if they are doing things like journaling and really
Yeah.
diving deep. But if they don't do stuff like that, they're not going to feel like this wave of like coolness necessarily,
No.
unless like breathing really helped with their central nervous system. But it's just like you kind of have to have a little bit of blind faith into the whole process. And my best example personally is just like first thing I thought when all this stuff was going down, I was like, why am I doing these daily episodes still? Like, amidst all this stuff, it's something that I enjoy, it's something people listen to. But of all the things on my list of what's important to do, why is that still there? And then it was just kind of, I guess I realized how much differently I felt in the whole of my day,
Yeah.
having still implemented that in there. And yes, it was kind of like it felt more inconvenient now than it did before all this stuff went down. But when the entire day was at a close and I did that part of the day, then I felt better about that day, even though I was super reluctant to do it going into it.
And that's where it's like hard. So like again, I'll go back to coaching because like that's what we do for a living and like whatever form that is, fitness, nutrition. But like it's our job kind of to be that feedback tool or that guide for like what that process is for. Because like I said, it's really hard to like ignorantly and blindly follow something. It's like it's like the basic advice like eat less or like move more or whatever. Or for meditation, it's like well you just need an app. You don't need anything. You just need to sit. And like most people, not most people, but like generally, I just don't see many people starting meditation and getting their calm app and like having an understanding of where this road leads. Like it literally makes no sense if you have if you have no idea where you're going with the thing. And I think for me personally, I was able to get there faster because like we had like a Zen Buddhist. So Ben's dad is literally like a Zen Buddhist. He used to do construction. Now he does Zen Buddhism, which is like a crazy story. But when there's 20 people sitting and there's like they're like kind of structured and they talk through kind of questioning of like what this is for and all this stuff. It actually was a lot easier to see the benefits of what this thing does. Because if you just sit in silence, like unless you have like some aha moment, like you have no idea what it does. It's just like like you were talking about high protein diets and stuff. Like if you don't know anything about nutrition, protein is just this word that someone said, and it's like it means chicken breast. Like it doesn't mean like thermal effective food. You're burning more calories. It doesn't mean your hunger signals are going down. It doesn't mean muscle to people. And so like a lot of those things, like especially with meditation, is like it's literally just sitting in silence. But there's a whole host of benefits that like you just aren't going to feel. Like it doesn't feel like anything to like be calm after you eaten food and like now you can digest food. Like you don't feel those things. You don't feel like, oh my, well, you might feel your stress levels go down, but you don't feel this aha enlightened moment generally. But you kind of do if you kind of are told like you should feel these things or you should feel like you're not as stressed or you should feel like this is allowing you to kind of have deeper thoughts or like put down your thoughts. And so I think that it is helpful to maybe research it a bit, or at least have someone that can help you with it. Kind of like people do with fitness. Like people know fitness is good. People know meditation is good. What do you do if you don't know anything about fitness? You hire a trainer. If you don't know anything about food, you hire a nutrition coach. So I think that with meditation, it's the same thing. And the apps don't always do that. Like they have guided meditation, but it just feels like you're following something blindly. And it's just, I don't, like you said, I don't think it's helpful. People take some 4 to 5 weeks to figure out like, oh, this thing is doing this. But it's a lot more helpful if you have like some structure to it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, one of my things that I've done is just really diversified like the people I'm surrounded by. And so like on my daily podcast, I've already collaborated with a yoga instructor who does meditation. And so she did an episode of meditation, and then it gives that opener for people to sort of grasp that concept through her scope and
Mm-hmm.
maybe apply it in a different way. And I did like this meditation of my own because like meditation is different for everybody and each person has their practice. So I took it's some garden music and like some water sounds and I put that in the background and I led people through a meditation because it's like, well, somebody's going to relate to me. Somebody's going to relate to the yoga person. Somebody's going to relate to the guests that I have. And then it just opens up the avenue for people to just give it a shot and see what happens. Throw the spaghetti at the fridge and see if it sticks.
Well, it's different. So I keep going back to Costa Rica, but like with the Zen Buddhism thing, like so Zen Buddhism is like really weird. Like it's just different than what you think meditation is. You literally sit in silence, obviously, but you have your eyes open. Okay, so your eyes are open the whole time, and the whole point of it is to like not think about anything. So like if thoughts come in, you're supposed to release your thoughts. So like it's not a space where you can kind of like. So there's other meditation where like it's guided like senses. So like you go through your sense of smell, your sense of hearing, your sight. Your feelings, your body, like your internal organs and all this stuff, like you feel your heart beating. So there's like all these different meditations, and like I hate Zen Buddhism. Like we go there and I'll like do like another practice. It's called the Wheel of Awareness, but I'll go through my senses and go through my body and go through my memories, and like I like to think and down regulate that way. And so I totally cheat. Like I don't do. I tried the Zen Buddhism one like a few times, but it's just like for me it just doesn't. It works, but you'll find the thing that you like. And with meditation, there's like that's the messed up thing. If you just think meditation, you think it's just literally sitting in silence. And there's like literally different ways to sit in silence, which is like was super weird for me. Because I always thought like with meditation, your eyes were closed. Like I don't know. Like I just seen like you see those Buddha people and their eyes are closed. Like that's meditation. And it's like you said, there's so many ways to do this thing. And so find out which way works for you. And that might be testing out different modalities and finding out what you like. But it's nice when someone else kind of guides you that process, because then at least you kind of know what to expect for that one way of doing it. Because I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's can even be transferred to the topic of like conditioning to some extent. I had somebody that was talking to me about how like they're finding that they're a little bit more winded going up and down the stairs. They kind of wanted something with a cardio aspect. They didn't have like a bike. They don't like running, but they want something that'll get their heart rate up. And they're like, well, I don't know if I have the motivation to do this. Like I'm really stressed. And I was like, well, do you like music videos? And they're like, well, yeah. And I was like, what do you like about music videos? And they're like, well, I like this hip hop one because like they got the cool dance moves. And I was like, okay. So go find the tutorials that are all over Instagram of how to learn the dance moves for this thing, and just go hard on learning the dance move for like a minute, and then take like 30 seconds rest, and then go back to it after that 30 seconds rest and learn it again, and then do that for like about 5 to 10 minutes, and that'll probably be pretty good cardio for you. And it's just like then they have fun. Versus if I say, you don't like running, I'm going to get you to take a run. I'm just going to go ahead and make you go for a run now.
Like do the thing you want to do. It's like there's so many different ways to do this fitness thing. I'm like a super big meathead. So like I obviously think my way is the right way. Everyone's got to lift heavy and get bigger, but like I obviously know that that's not the case. And there's a reason why. So there's a lot of the research involving physical activity, and like does it work for burning calories, does it not? Like no one really has an answer. It's kind of all up over the place, but a lot of it's because adherence isn't like a thing. So even in these studies where people are coming in to follow the study thing, they're not adhering to the plan, and so they don't get the results of it. And they're not adhering to the plan because they don't like it. Like that's generally why people don't do things. Like doesn't fit in their lifestyle, doesn't fit in what they're doing, doesn't fit in their time frame, and they don't even like doing it. So like my way of getting people involved, it's very similar to that. Like you said, like well you need to do cardio, and like you want these benefits of cardio. Like what are you going to do? Like if you work 5 days a week and you have 12-hour shifts, like you can only do things either in your breaks or like in the morning or night. And then maybe it's walks in the morning for you. Maybe it's walks at night for you. Maybe it's going on a Peloton. Maybe you don't like going on Peloton and biking. So like hip hop dancing is your thing, but find the thing you're going to do and like it doesn't have to be what Jillian Michaels did on The Biggest Loser as the only version of the like you can do for cardio for fat loss. So I like to like get creative in that sense. And like that whole thing, even working out or cardio, looks different. Like there's a million ways to do it. Find out which way works for you. Is it going to make you look like a bodybuilder? Like, well, no, not unless you do bodybuilding stuff. But if you want to do that, you have to do these things. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of fun to kind of figure out what people's triggers are for that stuff, which is very similar to like the meditation, like you're saying. It's like, which thing do you like the most, and what are you actually going to do? Because if you're actually going to do it, then at least you can build up on it. Like you said, you can do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Like you can, and then the next day you could do a minute on or a minute off for the next week or whatever. Like, there's always a way to progress, but you have to find something that you actually like first and then figure out that equation after.
It's so true. And I like how many times you brought up Costa Rica, because honestly, like for myself, like they're closing up shop there in Costa Rica, aren't they? Pretty soon.
Yeah. They shut. Oh, Ben's place. Yeah. They already left.
Yeah.
The whole down. Like they left, like I want to say like 4 days after we left, because like we literally couldn't leave the country after like we left like 4 days before their whole country closed. They're like, get on the flight and leave, otherwise you can't get home. So like, okay, but they did the same thing. They left to the States, but. And I only mentioned Costa Rica because, like I said, for me, that was my eye-opening experience since we started there to these things of, I don't want to say enlightenment, but of change and kind of where I am now. It was like that was my thing to compare to.
Well,
Where I'm
yeah,
currently.
but I mean, like it's been a common thread for a lot of people that have been on the podcast, just a lot of people that I've listened to through other podcasts and just heard of, and it's just like a matter of like-minded people all gathering together. There's the aspect of like being in an area that's a really good environment for learning and for feeling like sort of rested and kind of ready to go. For myself personally, like that would be one of my big goals to like go to something like that. But now it's gone. And I
Mhm.
understand there'll be new things that pop up in the future. There's always a new thing, but for yourself, like what are your new big goals for the future? Like so much has happened in the last 2 years that maybe you anticipated, maybe you didn't. Knowing what you know, what could you foresee yourself doing in the next 2 years?
Yeah, so like I kind of think about that because it's funny. Like you mentioned, like what's the next 2 years, and like I feel like I've been preparing for the like this apocalypse for like since whenever March of 2019, but kind of before that, kind of when we talk, everything's kind of built up to this, which is like streamlining my priorities. So like I got about we go out to my wife's mom's cabin in Alberta Beach, which is like half an hour away, and so in the summertime, we enjoy our time with the family like almost every weekend as much as we can. But that wasn't possible unless we sold our house. And then we sold our house, and now we have less finances, financial stress. We have these things. But essentially, I've gotten to this point where I'm online training. I'm at home. I can be with my dog every day. I have a boat. I can go do all that water sports in the summer. And like, I have like a sweet house. Love my wife. Everything's like really good. And this is like brag about like my life, but like I'm at the point now where it's like, what's next? And I think like for me, it's been about like getting rid of all this stuff for me that like hasn't been helpful. So like I used to travel to like doing a lot of continued education, like, and you've kind of known me for the last few years, but like I travel all the time and going to all these things, and I've been trying to reduce a lot of that stuff because I've kind of already tested the waters on the stuff I like, and I've just added a lot of those things back in. So it's more about just doubling down on the things that I'm doing that are A, paying the bills, that make me happy, and then B, the stuff that I kind of anticipate wanting to do. And a lot of that's going to be a lot of Ben House's new projects, because like that works for me. I like that group of people, and he keeps bringing in new people that I can learn from. Now I don't have to go to 5 different events all year and like have the stress of traveling and not knowing everything. So I'm just going to double down on that, double down on my nutrition coaching. Like I love the company I work for. I love the CEO. Like I love the people I work with. Like it's a great experience, pays the bills, and I like the kind of work we're doing. Like we're dealing with lots of different types of people, and so and then just doubling down on like spending time with the family in the summer, like when because in Canada it's cold all the time, but when it's not cold, it's like now I have this thing that I really like, and I'm not testing the waters, going camping this weekend, going to this birthday party or whatever. I've kind of just committed to the things that I know are good for me, and just continue that. And for me, that looks like literally the best way of explaining it is like I'm just sitting in, I guess, the life that I built, and then seeing what comes next, but operating on the premise that I'm going to still operate by not adding the things that I know haven't worked in the past and trying to add in more good stuff. And that's the best way to, I don't know, like I'm just sticking with what I did, which is kind of cool because I'm at that place and I feel like super privileged because of that. But I also sound like kind of a pretentious asshole for saying that. But I don't know. It is what it is.
Well,
I feel like I did well enough to like now just hang out here and just try to be successful doing things I was that have led to my successes and only do those things because it seems to be working.
I mean, if you see it through my lens, it's really not that bad at all. Like, I mean, I knew you when you were going to like seminar after conference, crushing through books. You were learning so many different things that it was overwhelming you.
Yeah.
And like for me to see that from my perspective, I was okay, like that is not sustainable over an extended period of time. But then you really zeroed in on like the direction that you wanted to take it. And it's not that it puts you into this echo chamber because it's like that was one thing I talked to James Serby about, and it was just like, you don't want to be in this crowd of people where somebody in there is like, oh yes, like nobody else is right, it is just us that are right. And it's
Hmm.
like, you don't want to be in that echo chamber. You want to be in a place where people want to always improve, and you almost want to position yourself in almost a variety of different rooms where you kind of feel like the dumbest person in the room. Like, I know that if I can get myself around people that I feel are smarter than me, that's like the best place to be, because then you're always going to learn a little bit. It just doesn't mean that for me as an individual, like I'm just dumb, but it's just that I kind of know where to put myself to learn and to grow.
Yeah, and like I've kind of, like you said, I kind of already went through that process of, I don't want to say being the echo chamber guy, but I kind of like entrenched myself in the things that I was entrenching myself in because I was learning new systems, and I'm at the other end of that process where I've kind of like felt like I've learned from all these different people, and the one commonality with a lot of the people presenting a lot of these cases and these new fitness goals and blah 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 is that they've kind of gotten themselves out of the echo chamber and they started to think for themselves. And so I'm at the point now where, like, even with the podcast and like my other podcast and doing presentations in Costa Rica and like taking on all this other stuff, as like I'm at the point now where I'm more creating stuff as opposed to following others. And so, like I said, I'm sitting with where I'm at personally, like I said, with my priorities, but a lot of that too is coming with a lot of my new stuff career wise is just kind of sticking with staying out of the echo chamber, but taking from all those other sources and starting to create something new. And you can kind of see it with the change in our podcast and like the change of the people I'm surrounding myself with. That's all part of that process. And so I just want to kind of continue being entrenched in not being entrenched, it's like my echo chamber is hanging out with the people that don't want to be in the echo chamber. And
Yeah.
but it's still an echo chamber, but it's kind of like the anti-echo chamber of echo chambers. That's an echo chamber.
You're investing in the people that you choose to be invested in some way. It's like you can't invest in everybody. You can't listen to everybody at the same time. You can only listen to a few people, and then it's just a matter of what your process is to decide as to who you're going to really learn from and to like dive into that process with. Like if you were trying to learn someone else's system and Dr. Pat Davidson's system at the same time, like it's not going to work. You got to choose one system, kind of learn it, and then go from there. See what way you're going to go
When
outward.
like, so for me, it's been more about like I've kind of refined what that process looks for me on like how I continue learning. And it ends up becoming, like you said, I did a lot before. Like I felt like I did a lot. Like, I felt like I was burning out. Part of the reason why when I left to Costa Rica, plug again, but when I left there, I realized the error of my ways, and I've kind of refined that down to doing less, but I'm getting more done because I'm not just like you said, running around with the chicken with my head cut off and like paying for all the stuff and learning all the stuff, which is super helpful. But it's not helpful when I don't have a system for disseminating that information and putting it into my own thought process or my own words or my own thing that I'm doing. And so now I feel like I'm just prepared to take on the world, so to speak, but do it at a slower pace. But it seems to be I'm having more output. So that's the cool thing about like getting rid of a lot of junk and a lot of stuff running in the background and doubling down on the things that A, I'm good at, and B, that I like, is that I've actually gotten more done and it doesn't feel like I'm burning out, which is kind of nice. Like when I look back on all the stuff I learned and all the stuff I did, it doesn't actually look much different than what I'm doing now, except for I'm spending way less time like sitting in my office studying for 10 hours. Like I didn't actually learn much because I was just like, it was just constant. And so it feels good to have a system, and I'm just kind of excited for what the future holds because I don't know where it's leading. But I think if I operate under the premise of prioritizing the things I like and the people I know, and kind of doubling down on that system that I've kind of been going through the last year, I think that it'll lead to good things. And I honestly don't know where that leads, but I like the system I have. Like I'm
Yeah.
totally cool with it, right, and I'm totally cool saying I'm cool with it. Like I feel really happy for, like, not for once, but I feel really happy with where I'm at, and that's a good thing because I want to extend that as long as possible. Now that I kind of know what that feels like, I don't want to go back to where I was. Like it wasn't awful, but it's a lot better here.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some crossover to like the physical training aspect of it. I was listening to the newest Rebel Performance episode today, and it's with a power lifter, and it's like
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, Will's
And
awesome.
so like he's super strong, and he alluded to the fact that it's just like sometimes it's not about the amount of like work that you put in. It's like the quality of recovery and the other things, the aspects of how you're utilizing your muscle structures and stuff, like how you're how you're using what you have, not how much you're using it, sort of thing. And so same thing with the mental aspect.
When it's like, so in that whole process that I talked about personally has manifested itself well nutritionally and physically. Like my whole training's changed. Like, and I'm doing more volume, I'm doing more exercise, I'm doing more frequency than I ever done before. And I'm still doing stupid stuff in the gym because like I still want to be strong and like I know that like the dose is the poison and I still like I keep a higher dose on some things just because I like deadlifting it. But like I've changed a lot of my training and I've gotten bigger. Like I've gained 20 pounds in the last like year just because I stopped doing again operating on the same premise. I stopped doing the stuff I know is bad for me, and I just started doing the stuff that like I liked and I felt good. But a lot of that took me from not being attached to for my personal personal I guess trigger was powerlifting. Like I need to be the strongest, I need to do all these things, but it wasn't really helpful for like my knee surgery or my hip surgery. Like, I was just broken, and so I had to let go of a few things to then understand the joy of training again, so to speak. And then it's like now I'm here, it's like I don't ever want to let that go. So it's just a matter of how did I get there, and I need to just keep doing that, which is the same process I did personally. So it's kind of cool that all those things align the same way. And like with Will, I know Will pretty well, and yeah, like he's an amazing powerlifter, but he's also like he does a lot of stuff powerlifters don't do, and that's a lot of the stuff that I've learned, like with the PRI and the DNS and a lot of these movement respiration based things. He's included it into his practice, and he's already at like the top like 0.5% of powerlifters. He's one of the strongest people in the world, but he's doing some of these other things, and I think like with his method, he's going to be able to do that thing longer. Where someone like me, who was like, I was good at powerlifting, but like, I just did all the wrong stuff, and I continue to do it. And it's I've learned the errors of my way. Where he's kind of at the point where I think he's doing things really well, and I hope that it pays off. But I think it's going to pay off for him in terms of longevity, which I don't see with a lot of people because it's just you do crazy stuff in the gym and it's just not helpful.
Yeah, no, it was super cool to listen to that because yeah, I think you're totally right. Like it's just he's invested in a process that's going to make what he loves more sustainable, which is awesome.
Right, because if you don't like, so for me, like I played football, which isn't sustainable because you only have a certain shelf life. But with powerlifting, like I loved powerlifting, and like now I don't do powerlifting because I was doing it in a way that wasn't sustainable. And luckily, I had other pillars in my life that I could lean on. But had powerlifting been the only thing in my life, like that would have been a pretty fragile thing because the way I was doing it took it away from me. And so, like I think that that's if you take that and apply it to other people, it's like don't let things I guess don't let your whole life hang on one thing, and because and do it in a way where it's sustainable if it is, because it's just like dieting. Like you can't diet forever. You can't just keep eating less calories over time. Like it just doesn't work that way. Like you can't white knuckle dieting. Same thing with meditation. You if you just jump into it and do like an hour every day because you're like, oh, meditation is good. Like you won't last. Like it's just so like again that comes back to the premise of do the things that you like, but also do the things that like make you feel better and do more of that. It seems super simple, but it's actually hard.
Yeah, well, it's something a lot of people can learn from, and it's with it crosses over to so many different modalities. Like a lot of my listeners are they're really connected with like the Peloton classes and stuff like that. And they just need to remember they are not the bike. They are more than the bike. They are not that remote class. They are more than that class. And it's just like if that thing helps everything else be more sustainable, then maintain that thing. But if you're finding that that thing starts to take away from the sustainability from everything else in your life, like your happiness, your wakefulness, your energy levels, your ability to just like do things and feel strong, then maybe step back from that thing. Like I noticed when I've ridden in a lot of spin classes, I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily as strong as far as how much I can lift. But when I do a moderate amount, I get strong really fast because my recovery improves. I'm not like at such a energy deficiency. Like I'm actually listening to my body properly and not letting one modality of fitness overtake me because of just some kind of like a competition aspect or just some desire to like stay in the loop of things sort of thing.
well, or at least have a plan. Like there's something to be said for like specificity. So for like powerlifting or like let's say Peloton, but let's turn Peloton into like competitive cycling. So like you have to like do that thing almost like in an imbalanced state to like be good at it. But understand that like that's not sustainable. And if it is sustainable long term, it's also fragile. Meaning like if you lose your bike or like you break your leg, like you can't bike, does your whole life stop because of that? If that's the anchoring habit. So like at least know what the action plan is after that, because like I said, there's something you said for being like super niche down and super specific, and it's like if you like Peloton and like that's what you want to do it. Just know that if that thing's taken away from you, what are you going to do to like find meaning in life outside of that? And the best way to, not the best way, but the way I like to look at it now, kind of where I'm at, is like to have multiple things at once. So like I'll have my training and my bodybuilding, but I know like I still have my powerlifting. Like if I were to not be able to do arms, I could still do legs or whatever. Like I find, or I could go like focus more on my work or something. Like I have other things that if I lose the one thing, I feel like I'm prepared to not have my whole life feel like it's crumbling down if I lose that one thing. And I wasn't always there. Like I think we talked about it last time, but like I've had surgery on my knee. I've had my knee blown out, and like in those moments at like 21 years old, like I thought my whole life was ending. Like I literally don't have football. I don't like school, and like what the fuck am I gonna do? And so I guess growing up or like evolving as I have, that's like the one thing that I think is really helpful for me to tell people is like have more than one thing. And if you only have one thing, at least know what your plan B is and have an action plan for that. That way you're just not fucked when shit hits a fan. Because if your whole identity was wrapped up in a CrossFit gym right now, like that was your life before and there's nothing else, like you're fucked. Like they're all closed. So now what? Are you just gonna like not do anything? Like that doesn't make any sense. And so I think that this pandemic stuff, wrapping all the way back around, is what I think it will do. It for a lot of people, hopefully, is that it will kind of give them some more perspective on like the downfalls of the errors of their ways in a lot of ways. Because what happens when we lose all these things? Like we can't go outside, we can't go work out in a gym with weights. I can because I have a gym in my basement, but like again, I have a plan B, so like I'm a little bit more resilient to handling these things. So I think a lot of people are going to look at life after this and hopefully have different action steps in their life to kind of not be affected so deeply by a change of environment.
So in the last couple weeks, maybe a month or so, you and Andrew have been crushing out a bunch of episodes with different fit pros around North America, essentially. And I've listened to them all. For anybody who is unfamiliar, check out The Fitness Devil. But what has been some advice that's really stood out to you, like been light bulb moments for you when you're listening to these conversations, or perhaps just the conversations that you've had just in general with like people in your circle?
I think there's like two of them, and like there's probably three. So the first one was like the conversation with Mark Fisher and Chad Landers. Like I said, two predominant gym owners on different coasts in the States, but like super successful. But a lot of that was like plan for this thing to be longer. And I think that that's good advice for any like kind of change of environment. Like plan for the worst and then like hope for the best. But like plan for like things to not be good. So at least like you're ready for whatever that is. And for this situation, it's COVID, but it could be getting plantar fasciitis and you can't go running. So like then what? The other thing would be we had Luca on and Pete Dupuis, and we kind of talked about this before. So again, two big gym owners, one in sports performance and Luke is out in Seattle, but like two of the biggest gyms and two of the biggest names in the fitness industry. But their big thing was, as a trainer with a lot, and we're nutrition coaching, but there's fitness training, there's this whole idea that we have to jump online and all this stuff. But I think that if you're going to make the jump online, you have a period where you suck at it. And kind of like you alluded to, like you're testing out all these new videos and we're doing more podcasts and all this stuff. But now is the time to kind of get your chops, because when this whole thing's over, when this whole COVID thing's over, a lot of the high performers in this industry are also going to be dabbling in online training, and they're going to have different products because now they realize how fragile this system is. They're going to have to step up their game. And so the people who are already like good at what they do before this pandemic, now they're ending in the online space. So we have to be, the smaller guys have to like step up their game in terms of being better at creating online products, if that's the path you want to go, because now the space is going to be flooded with some of the best of the best. And so that was eye-opening in the sense that like, oh damn, I should probably like start writing. I should probably start doing all this stuff, because if I don't do it, there's a lot of people stepping into this ring now, and I want to be kind of ahead of the game. And the third thing, what was it? It was, oh yeah, like big thing. And this is it just got released today. It's Craig Weller, but he works for PN, but he was in the Army, and it was kind of a very timely conversation because we were talking about stress and like whatever stress, but the difference between anxiety-based stress and fear-based stress. And so fear-based stress, you can think of like a tiger's chasing you, which probably isn't going to happen nowadays, but like you're scared, like what the fuck are you going to do? You're going to tighten up and run and get the fuck out of there. That's one type of stress. But there's also anxious stress. So that's like when fear of the unknown, and like you don't know, like you have this looming sense of fear of something happening. And so right now we're in a lot of anxious energy. Like people don't know if they're gonna have a job. They don't know if their job's gonna be there. They don't know when this pandemic's gonna end. They don't know if someone's gonna get sick that they know and die, or like maybe they'll get sick, or one of their kids gonna go back to school. So there's a lot of anxious energy, but a lot of anxious type stress kind of looming in the background. And it's gonna manifest its way into something. So like right now, or back in the wild with hunter-gatherers, if they had anxious energy or they didn't know when they're going to get food, they went out and got it. They did something physical to complete that loop, because like they were in a world where there wasn't that many options. So they had the ability to kind of manifest that stress and then get it out of the system, doing something, going to get food, getting water, going for a run, whatever. We don't have that nowadays. Like this stress is kind of just happening, and we have our cell phones, and we have Tiger King, and we have all these things that aren't really physical manifestations of, and it's happening anyways. So we have to find ways to complete that loop in a way in which we're evolved to do, which is physical activity or like walking or doing something. And one of his big things, that was a long intro, but one of his ways of dealing with this was a thing called trigger workouts. But I thought it was super smart. Like he was like, every time have like a set of rules or a kettlebell like laying in the middle of your living room, or like you had a pull-up bar. Every time you walk past that thing, do like a 2-minute workout, or do something every hour, or every time you walk by your couch, do like a set of like 50 push-ups or whatever. But find a way to kind of deal with the stress, because right now it's happening regardless of whether we want it to. Like everyone's kind of in the same boat. And he's like, you'll notice it. Like people will start watching TV more. They'll start playing more video games, all stuff that we both have done. Or we'll try to find ways of like kind of dealing with the stress. And we need to do it. Not we need to do it, but it's more helpful to do it restoratively in the sense of quick workouts that aren't stressful. And so I thought that was really helpful, because I noticed myself kind of falling into a lot of these patterns, and like I just needed to like go do something active to complete it. And I thought that was really helpful, because right now I think a lot of people are dealing with that. And like we were talking about before, being ignorant to it. I think a lot of us know that it's bad, but they don't know how it's manifesting itself. And once you kind of notice some of the patterns you're doing, you're like, oh damn, it is affecting me. Like I am playing video games a lot more. Maybe I should do something a little bit more productive to get rid of this stress, because the video games aren't actually fixing it in this exact case.
Yeah,
Long
that's true.
answer. But I think like I didn't even like make that, like I just made that up on the spot, but it has made an impact on me, those 3 things for sure.
For sure. So if you were to give one piece of advice on how to live your life to the fullest in the most authentic way now, what would that piece of advice be?
Very similar to what I said before. I think like I don't want to call it like it's kind of like an audit of your life, but like really ask yourself, like, does this thing make me happy, or is this thing productive for the goals I want? And that comes with knowing where you want to be in life. But like kind of once you understand where you want to be, start being pretty, not aggressive, but start being pretty active in the process of eliminating the suck and upping the good. Is that a FUBAR or up the good, turn down the suck? Like
yeah, no, it makes sense, and I think I've heard it. I just can't remember where I heard it, but that was perfect.
Definitely FUBAR, which is based in Edmonton, which is perfect. One of my favorite movies, which should say a lot about myself, and hopefully it doesn't. But
that's
after
awesome.
all meditation, my favorite movie is FUBAR. Like.
So that episode didn't have so much of a smooth stop. It had more of a hard stop, kind of like when you're at an intersection approaching a red light and you forgot to wear your seatbelt, and then your head slams and hits the dashboard. And that's why we wear our seatbelt. The point that I'm trying to get at here is if you want to learn more about Dean Guedo, check out the Fitness Devil podcast. That is something that him and Andrew Coates host. A lot of people who have been following my journey will understand that, like, that's been a podcast that I've listened to. Those guys are cool guys in my life that have helped me at various moments, plenty of times. And so that's something where you can really dive into a lot of other trainers in the industry and the really fitness centric aspect of things. It's great for fitness professionals, but even for just people who just want something else to listen to in addition to what I put out there. In addition to that, today's episode challenge of the day. So Dean's a big fan of comics. He has a Venom tattoo. I think he has a Spider-Man tattoo, and that's sort of like a centric portion to him. So I want to know, which superhero are you? And tell me about it in the comments of the Lifestyle Chase page. So if you aren't already, please go and follow at the Lifestyle Chase on Instagram. If you aren't following me, follow at Christian Little. If you aren't following Dean, follow Guido Power, or as it's easier to say, Guido Power, because Guido is just more fun to say. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out old episodes. Go check out the episode where I initially interviewed Dean way back almost 2 years ago and see the contrast. Hear a bit more about his backstory. We really talk about like what makes him who he is, a bit more about how he got into the industry. And it just kind of gives you more context into the guy that you listen to today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.